And let's see. Okay, perfect. Okay, so starting again, this session is part of GGU's Campus Week, as well as our ongoing series for students, professionals, and hiring managers to explore how AI is shaping careers, leadership, and lifelong learning. So whether you're entering the workforce, advancing your career, or hiring the next generation of talent, the discussion today is meant to provide practical guidance on thriving in an AI-powered world. So before we begin, I'd like to thank our incredible partners at Golden Gate University, including Sia Zadeh, Judy Lee, and Robert Schaffner for their thought leadership and coordination in making this event happen. Also, a huge thank you to GGU's marketing and on-site IT teams for their support in getting us up and running. AI is transforming the workplace, but the question is, what does that mean for students, for professionals, and employers? So today, our panelists are going to be discussing the most in-demand AI-related skills and how to develop them, how AI is shaping hiring, leadership, and career evolution, lifelong learning and adapting to an AI-driven future, and the question that every job seeker and hiring manager will need to answer: what AI skills do you have? So we'll start with panelist introductions, move on to a structured discussion, and then open the floor for Q&A. Because we are both in person and live via Zoom, you can contribute questions via chat or in the room at the end. And so because we are also recording, I ask that we do keep questions and discussions in the room for the Q&A session at the end. In addition, we will have an additional 30 minutes in room after this webinar for anybody that wants to stick around, ask questions of our panelists, or have deeper discussions. And on that note, I'm really honored to introduce our honored panelists, Suni Lobo, Chief People Officer for Gong. Suni is a people-first leader with expertise in talent strategy, leadership development, and AI-driven HR innovation. She helps organizations build future-ready teams and navigate the evolving workforce. Next, we have Younes Aftab, CEO at TrustMe.ai. Younes is a technology and AI strategist specializing in AI adoption, innovation, and digital transformation. He brings insights on how AI is shaping industries, business strategy, and hiring practices. We also have Sia Zadeh, Chair AI Task Force for GGU, whom I think many of you already know. Sia leads AI strategy and compliance efforts at GGU, focusing on data privacy, security, and responsible AI adoption. He provides expertise on AI governance and its role in education and workforce. And last, we have Larry Chow, Managing Director, Ethical AI Governance Group, EAIGG. Larry is an AI governance and ethics expert. He helps organizations implement AI responsibly while ensuring fairness and transparency in hiring, decision-making, and leadership. So let's kick it off today. Thank you to our panelists. First, we're really going to set the ground by talking about the future of AI and human collaboration, specifically the skills, careers, and the evolution of work. So to kick that off, Suni and Younes, can you talk to us a little bit about how is AI going to reshape career paths and job roles in the next 5 years? What are some of the trends you're seeing?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Great to be here, by the way. Good to see people in the room here, too. Younes and I are going to tag team this particular question. But when I think about AI and I think about all of the revolutions we've gone through from a technological perspective over the years, this is much like the Industrial Revolution, right? If you think about how workforces have been transformed. And the future of this transformation will look like, and this is not restricted to, but some of the things that we will bring about is, of course, the first thing that we think about is automating a lot of, whether it's mundane or repetitive tasks, that's the first thing. Creating new opportunities to increase productivity in the workplace. Think also automating a lot of the work that we do today. And then bringing about a lot of innovation from an industry perspective. I think about healthcare, I think about transportation, I think about customer experience. In every industry that we touch, AI can provide a real revolutionary lens to the way we approach the work, but also innovate the work that we do, throughout the industry that we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think building on that, the way I think about, what we see from customers' perspective, I would say it's two broad categories, right? One is the career paths in terms of what I would call you are making AI, right? You are becoming a foundational part of the journey. Let's call it the infra layer, and I'll talk about it a little bit later as well. But you are focusing on building the models, you are focusing on building data sets, you are focusing on building inferences, you are doing something that fundamentally defines AI. Now, that is very limited. What I mean by that is when it comes down to it, if you think about AI and people talk about models, there's large language models, small language models, and there are very few people in the world who are building large language models. You can say maybe in hundreds, if that. So what that means is there's not necessarily hundreds of thousands of people required to build large language models, but they will be translated into smaller language models and there's more application. But how you use the models would be obviously a question in the second category. So there is a whole group of career paths, in my opinion, that are about creating AI, be it models, large language, small language, domain specific, whatever it might be, creating data sets that are consumed by those models, creating the compute, how those data centers, how that infrastructure gets run. So, obviously the newer of people getting utilize their power, IP, transport, all those things are considerations there. So I think that's like the first big category when I think about AI and what we see from customers, that you're focused on fundamentally building AI, right? Now, having said that, that sounds appealing, but as I already said, there are limited options there because there's so many people who can build game-changing models, and obviously you can customize them and you can use them, but that's a space where there's a lot of innovation happening and hence resulting into a lot of potential career opportunities. The second broad base, as when you start talking about different verticals, is where you think about AI not necessarily being a core of what you're doing, like you're not building AI, you're not AI career person, but maybe you are kind of utilizing its deployment, you are building on that infrastructure, and that's not a bad place to be either, because now you're thinking about maybe you become a super X replacement of somebody who is doing something mundane or repetitive, and you could do it much faster, better. So kind of the replacement notion. The second could be in that category, augmentation, where you're thinking about AI and you're tasked with essentially ensuring that you leverage AI and get something done faster, right? And the last thing I would say in that category where you're thinking about AI, and I think this is probably the most important, is thinking about being people who are redefining the process that stems from AI, that's creation of new processes, right? So as Sunny said about Industrial Revolution, there's another one, the Internet Revolution, right? How many people have heard of yellowtaxi.com? I think you use that as an example, right? So when Internet came along, you had one path to essentially go take the existing models that did not really work well, right? And digitize them, and lo and behold, that happened. So in the 90s, you'll see actually a lot of startups that were basically about digitizing what were manual workflows into automated internet workflows. But that was not the answer. The answer was to rethink the process. The answer was Uber. So that is the same thing from a career perspective in AI. I think the third one, we're taking AI and turning into a creation problem, like redoing your processes. We are seeing a lot of companies talk about that, hey, I used to do these three things with these three people. So they're not asking the question, how will I do it with AI? They're asking the question, hey, you know AI, how would you just do it differently? Like, can you rethink the process? Can you rethink So I think that is the last part. So overall, two broad areas in my opinion. One is about building AI. One is about taking AI and putting it to work. And I think the latter may be the most applicable to most of us, because you might have relevant skills in one area, but that doesn't mean that you have to miss out on the AI wave. You have to think about how those skills could transfer over and turn as an advantage in a workforce environment.
Yeah, great feedback there. So as we think about the fact that it's not just about the people that are building the models, but also how are you utilizing and partnering with AI, one of the big questions that comes up is, what are the skills that professionals and students should be developing in order to stay relevant, in order to stay ahead of the curve? Sia, I know that this is, the art of learning. This is a big area of expertise for you. Can you and Suni give us a little insight into what are some of the skills that people should be focusing on?
Sure. As it was mentioned, AI is very transformative. So it's very important for students and people who are interested in either moving on to a different professional trajectory to understand the impact of this transformation. It was already mentioned, on the previous industrial revolution, if the first industrial revolution, and in fact even including the second one, was more to increase our physical prowess, and supplement our physical prowess. With the digital transformation that has started out about over 30 years ago, now we're moving the era that this is enhancing our cognitive power as well. So this is very different this time around, especially with AI. I mean, that's why the word artificial intelligence is. On the very high level, as you talk to a lot of employers, they're looking at two broad categories. This is gonna basically impact their businesses. They see this AI as a force multiplier, a human capital multiplier. They want everyone to be AI savvy, AI literate, to enhance their work productivity. That is going to get mapped out into a specific context of each business, but that's where a lot of businesses are looking for. How this is going to impact your job. Good example would be, we are hearing a lot of impact of AI on legal profession. Enable research, creation of content and documentation. So this is clearly enhancing the work of a lot of staff, especially paralegal, who are trying to, for any specific case, to do their research, create some briefs, create content, document. Now that can be enhanced. As was mentioned, AI should be always considered as ultimate collaboration between man and machine. So you need to really, specific on the type of task you have, to look at what is that enhancement, where can you harness AI? There's a lot of talk about AI replacing jobs, but AI really not replacing jobs. It may replace some tasks. Simple, routine, repetitive tasks are going to get automated. Just like happened during the second revolution when manufacturing got organized, assembly line was introduced, that really scaled up. These type of activities enhance productivity, allow businesses to scale up their business objectives, operations. So you need, as a prospect student, to learn that. That means you have to be, even if it's a tool that you have to use, you need to be well versed in using the tool. Same thing happened 30 years ago when digital transformation was introduced. You had to learn personal productivity tools. These days, we take for granted that everybody is familiar with computers, use the personal productivity tools. Future is AI tools. How do you use AI tools? It may appear as a black box to you, but you really have to have good understanding of the different type, different purpose, and improve your critical thinking to evaluate and assess the outcomes that these tools provide, because that's what business want. Not to applicate your critical thinking and your responsibility, rather than harness that to enhance your cognitive capabilities toward the business. So you need, some cases, depending on the type of business, you may need to actually learn some programming or understand the inner workings of those platforms. As was mentioned, large language models. Now they're moving to more customized version of them. You're going to hear a lot about AI agents in the next coming few months. What are those agents? So as a student, really behooves you to be well versed in understanding these tools and how they're going to impact your education, your future professional, career, and all the things that the specific business is going to require you in terms of what it means to be AI literate.
Excellent. And Suni, I mean, this is near and dear to your heart with your experience at Gong.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I'd add, actually, a couple of things that I'd add to what you said, Sia, because you really comprehensively covered what we're going to be thinking about, both from a skills perspective, in Eunice's point, in the creators and the users, right? But there are a couple of skills in addition to what you mentioned that are going to be universal skills across both those chasms, so to speak. Problem solving, critical thinking, communication, strategic analysis. These are things that are going to be heightened with the use of AI. So, we're not going to replace what you do, or AI is not going to replace what you do, but it's going to make you think in a very different way critically about how you apply the knowledge you have. So, the soft skills aspects often get left out in the whole AI conversation, and you've talked a lot about the harder skills, the engineering skills. I'm talking about soft skills that are going to be actually really, really important for us to deploy and learn in university settings so that you're able to then go into the workflows and deploy them really quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, excellent call to the balance of the hard and the soft skills. So as we're taking a look and thinking about that partnership with AI and people, how can AI enhance rather than, as we've been talking about, replace creativity, leadership, decision-making? Larry, I know you've had some thoughts about what that partnership really looks like and how that can be successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, ultimately the future of AI will hopefully be human-centric, where it's there to augment people versus replace people. But I think to be able to do that really requires people to sort of step back and sort of look at, hey, what are we good at? What are they good at? And sort of to what Sia was saying, like, how can you break down a job or a function into a number of tasks, and which parts should be automated, which parts should not be? And so sort of having sort of this, proactive thought about this, I think is really key. To sort of, expand to the last question, I think one of the things that people need to really develop, is the problem solving and sort of the critical thinking aspect of it. But I think where people can really play a role is to sort of become deep, almost like vertical experts or sort of domain experts in these kinds of things. And so, the thing about generative AI is you can produce a lot of content that looks good and makes sense. But, this is where we've seen studies where people who are experts in the field can better use AI because they can sort of differentiate what's real and what's not real. What's the real news versus fake news.
Yeah.
I think that's something that can't be underemphasized, because I think with AI the key thing is there's just going to be a tremendous amount of data, and to be able to sort of sift through all of that is sort of the key skill set that people need.
Yeah. So as we think about working with AI and we think about getting into our into professional careers, advancing our professional careers, let's ask a kind of tactical question. How can professionals or students showcase their AI literacy in interviews and job applications? See, I think this is one that you had some thoughts on, as well as Suni, I imagine, near and dear to your heart.
As I always tell my students, is that as they are talking to their prospective future employers, just mentioning, I know AI, it's not sufficient. I don't think there's anybody left in our society or globally that has not heard such a buzz on that. Main thing is that understanding how AI has impacted their personal life, what is their personal story, how they have actually worked on a project that they have done a transformation. AI, as was mentioned earlier, always starts with data. So there's a journey that data takes through AI to be converted into business insights and ideas. One of the key things our businesses are looking for is that, as was mentioned exactly, not just to look at the existing processes as they are, how we can innovate such processes. Business innovation often is not as emphasized as it should be, especially in education programs. Our education in this school, in fact, we really emphasize on innovation, because it was mentioned that, yes, you could have probably put the yellow cap online, but that was not the whole idea, just create a digital version of them. What is a new way of thinking about transportation? How do you bring the consumers who need of that transportation to the service side of that transportation? So look across all industries, from healthcare was mentioned. There's significant room for process improvement, streamlining, and better care. How can you innovate that type of care? There's a lot of room in those industries because generally some industries have always been understaffed, under-resourced. So a lot of room for business innovation. Same in finance. How do you improve, let's say, monitoring of all the transaction? How do you prevent fraud? We are still inundated, in fact, with all the security we have, the significant fraud takes place.
Yeah.
How you can use AI for instance? So that's the kind of stories that it needs to happen. They need to see a very project-based use of AI that a transformation of either data or an idea was done to impact the business. And that's where really matters. Not just something that, I know AI, for that matter, I know Python, a program language.
Yep.
Those are
Yep.
tools toward an end.
Yep.
The transformation process is always more important for prospective employees.
And this goes back, Suni, to what you were talking about really applying that critical thinking. So how else can people really showcase their literacy in your experience?
I think what we're doing right now is in our interview process, we are asking specific questions about innovation, about how have you actually impacted a process using AI. And the answers are actually very interesting. So from I don't know much about AI, and I'm on the periphery to, and we, at Gong, which is my previous company, we are an AI native product. So we were formed 7 years ago, and our product is AI native. So for revenue intelligence, which is the sales teams. So if you're coming to a company like Gong, you're interviewing with a company like Gong, and you say, I don't know much about AI, it's on the periphery. That is a good cue for you to not interview with the company, right? Yeah. But you also are interviewing for various types of roles. Of course, with our engineers, we have different ways of assessing talent. But if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, if you're in finance, you're in HR, we're asking you questions around how have you used AI to enhance what you do, to increase time to market, to revolutionize an industry or a process or a product. A great example I have is a friend of mine at Amazon who leads all of the sales territories on the East Coast. And this is as part of their planning process every year, they literally have to write, Amazon doesn't do presentations, right? They don't do PowerPoint very famously. So he used to spend at least 2 weeks writing a document that talked about his territory plan for the East Coast with all of the sales reps that he led. 2 weeks. With AI, he brought that down to 2 days, right? So he leveraged AI.
Yeah.
He thought about, what is it that I want to have put in front of me from a data perspective? How do I critically analyze that data? But how do I reduce time to market as a result of that? So it's a tangible example of someone who's not technical, who's not an engineer, but a sales leader that wants to actually increase his time to market. So, thinking differently about how you apply and the application of AI and showcasing that in your interviews is going to be critical.
Yeah. So keeps on, regardless of the solution, regardless of the technology, it really just comes back to connecting to the goals of the business, connecting to the goals of the industry that you're getting involved in. And so on that note, Eunice, AI is already changing education, healthcare, and business. Can you talk to us a little bit about what are some of the most meaningful changes that you've already seen happen in those industries to help us understand, how we would approach getting into those industries?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think kind of building on some of the kind of points that we mentioned, we have seen, and if you think about it in that pyramid that I was earlier talking about, like at the foundational layer, more data sets being available across industries, right? You can go out and say, hey, I want to run drug trials, and you can find data sets that are relevant. You want to go do legal research, you can find data sets that are relevant. You don't have to do week-long research. We have different types of models that are available that are relevant. So I think in industries where repetition was a key, I was looking at Gartner data, a lot of repetition, business process automation, that's been the #1 driver of AI adoption, right? And that could be across verticals, right? So where you're using repetitive data, you can apply similar types of models. You can then apply that to kind of resolution faster. So business process automation has been easy. It's been, think of customer support, think of hospitality, think of transportation, scheduling. So I think some of those easy pieces have already been conquered in a lot of ways. So that's, if you're kind of thinking about the future, maybe business process automation was the place to start, and that will continue to have that trajectory. But now people are looking for more verticalized, things that are domain specific and drive adoption with the stickiness. So I think that's the thing. I feel like that's maybe up and coming or more there. You look at actually a lot of startups. I mean, more recently, you'll also find there's a lot of people saying, hey, there's a 2-people company and they have this many millions of revenue. But you also find data saying that they also go away. Why? Because if somebody can solve a business process automation problem using AI quickly, so can you, right? So that's why, the place where I think a lot of businesses are thinking about now is that how can that be verticalized with a moat, meaning that the products, the AI solution that you have built is unique, is specific, and it provides you a competitive advantage. If all you're doing is using AI for business process automation, well, that can be copied. That could be done by the other person. So is that a competitive advantage? It's almost like a skill that you have to have to survive, right? So I think thinking about that verticalization is a challenge for some of these businesses where they have reaped the benefits of easy business process automation with AI. Yeah, I can do my legal research faster. I can do my customer support faster. But now the question is, okay, I did my customer support faster, but is it really resolving the customer issue? Am I doing my legal research faster? Is it taking care of the data privacy issue? I was talking to a company, a real customer, that they deployed an AI tool, and because it didn't have separation of data, it actually took every customer's data, put it together with every other customer. So they actually reversed the AI tool. So yes, AI business process automation is great, but they had to build the next level of separation so that actually can drive long-term benefits versus a word science project. So I think those are the kind of things that we need to be thinking about, that, hey, it's helping, it's getting adoption, but am I thinking about evolving it to a point where it becomes a long-term competitive advantage for me?
Yeah. And, as we think about that long term, we have AI is escalating at a rapid, unbelievable pace. I mean, we're talking exponential curves of technology. So what are some of the advancements that are going to have the biggest impacts on our daily life? I think, Larry and Suni, you definitely have some thoughts and experience on this. We talked a little bit, for example, about agents coming into play. What are some of the advancements that we're really, looking forward to in terms of impact?
Yeah, I think, essentially, AI is a skill the way the internet is a skill. It's like, you wouldn't necessarily brag about the fact that you can use the internet. You just need to know how to Google, and to use Facebook.
The World Wide Web.
Sort of find ways to sort of work into it.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of this, experimentation, we talked earlier about sort of projects, is I think a lot of these things, especially for, the coming generations, like, the Gen Zs, the Gen Alphas, who are digitally native, I think, what we've seen with Web 2.0 is basically anybody can essentially be a content creator, anybody can sort of be an expert there. And I think the question is, like, how can you sort of use AI to basically facilitate sort of the stuff you're doing? Like, I think, if you don't have a school project, you don't have an enterprise project, you could basically set up your own platform on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on whatever, TikTok. And basically, you can use AI to sort of help you with not just sort of your content, but you can also make it look better. You have a logo, you have music, you have all these other things. And so I think the question is really ultimately, fundamentally, what do you want to do? What do you sort of care about? And how can you sort of use AI to sort of to do that? Like I said, the agents aren't going to be able to do everything for the whole life cycle. They're going to be able to help you with certain tasks within there. And so the question is, whether that's, your own personal life or your work or whatnot, how can you sort of break this up into things and sort of identify the ways that AI can sort of help make your life easier?
Yeah, that's great.
And if I may add to that,
Yeah.
I mean, on the consumer side, one area that we're going to see quite a bit in the next few months and year as it's rapidly advancing is customization or personalization of AI. On the consumer side, you're going to see significant growth on variety of personal assistant, shopping assistant, travel assistant, general type of everything that average consumers can basically use to leverage resources they have to enhance their personal life, personal experiences, the travel, entertainment, content creation, especially with the introduction of what is called AI at the edge, with the proliferation of instruments, smartphones, smart devices, everybody's hand, and the next generation, they're all going to be AI enabled. There's significant opportunities for that type of activities. Just like with social media, who would have thought a few years ago, there's a category of professions called influencers. But it is actually for a significant number of them.
Is that actually true?
It is, yeah, there are a significant number of them. They're apparently making good money. But, but I mean, there's probably a spectrum. Then few make good money, the rest of them think they can make money, just like
And then selling how to make money by buying theirs.
Trying to absolutely do that.
Yes.
But that's probably going to take place quite a bit on that personalization level too. Then the other area that we don't often usually mention much is robotics. Robotics is advancing rapidly, and the next generation of robotics is going to be AI enhanced and AI enabled robotics. So robotic process automation, it's not just going to be at industrial scale, it would be at personal level too, from personal use of robotics for family use, for personal use, for, in fact, in a lot of times in industries such as healthcare, we could possibly even see introduction of robotics for very critical, precision medicine and precision surgical, operations there too, because it enhances human cognitive capabilities. Already it's being used for certain aspects in the healthcare, like especially area like that's under resourced, like post-acute procedure discharge is an area that clinicians, hospitals always struggle with to mitigate the probability of readmission, actually get fined if someone who's released from a acute procedure, it is readmitted due to some lack of supervision or negligence, all that. These are the areas that you're going to see a lot of AI influence. So customization and at the personal level, consumer level, as well as at the specific task of business.
Yeah, excellent insights. So when we think about all of these opportunities, all of these areas of advancements that are happening, Suni, I think this is something that you have insight into. How can leaders and organizations upskill their teams and get ready for this AI integration? Ansi, I know you probably also have some thoughts on that as well.
We have this phrase that we use, especially at Gong, that Microsoft coined, actually Satya from Microsoft coined. He said, I want to create a culture where we have learn-it-all folks rather than know-it-all folks. And for those who knew Microsoft in the Bomber days, it was clearly a know-it-all company. And then when they transformed through Satya's leadership, have become a learn-it-all company, and you can talk about the differences in market cap as a result. So there's tangible, outcomes from that, right? So especially at Gong, we're really passionate about creating the culture and the environment where we encourage people to learn. We encourage people to have conversations and try out different things through our technology, because we have an AI native product. So a lot of the enhancements on our product, which started off just being a transcription product, to be honest, right, 7 years ago. So, our CEO had a vision. He had a co-founder in Israel who was an engineer, and they created a product which is essentially a transcription product that you went to a customer with. So if you had a call with a customer, the product would just transcribe the call. Now, as you know, everyone does that today. So there's no competitive advantage. What has happened since then, we grew 30% last year. And the growth rate has been in the between 28 to 30% since the inception of the company, barring 1 year. And the reason for that is now the product has evolved and enhanced to a point where there's a lot of information that not only our sales folks get, but also our customers get around the data that is being transcribed, right? Prompts around what you can do to increase revenue in the organization, so on and so forth. So we've now enhanced the product to such an extent where it's becoming sticky. It's not something that can be universally applied. And that's because we have a culture where we encourage people to learn on the job, but also to make sure that we are eating out or drinking our own champagne. I was going to say eating our own dog food, but we're drinking our own champagne. We're trialing out things in the organization. We're giving folks an opportunity via hackathons globally to do that. So creating that culture is really important, because you can get to the point of saying, oh, it's the engineering team's job, and we are just the users, they are the creators. But if we are all in it together and we have a culture that actually rewards and appreciates that, that's what's going to create the multiplication that you talked about, Sia, earlier.
Yeah, and Sia, that feeds into as well, the continuing learning, the art of how to learn. So can you speak to a little bit of that?
Absolutely. If there's been any time that lifetime learning or continued learning is essential, it is the era of AI. Not only for students who are graduate and to make sure they stay always refreshed for market advancement. But if I were an employee of any organization, any business, I would actually go to my senior leadership and request professional development on AI. There is a definite need for reskilling of the workforce across all organizations, public, private, for-profit, non-profit, because there is benefit to be gained, benefit to be realized by harnessing the power of AI for any purpose. So that type of reskilling is definitely needed. Institutions like us, actually, we are trying to create a variety of programs from a one-time type of course, webinars of this nature, which is the general information dissemination, to certificate programs or degree programs for enable to people to be reskilled and learn a technique. This is not an era that 20, 30 years ago your education would be sufficient for the advancement in your careers and all that. Same with leadership. I think there's all the leadership needs to go to, I would say, a training in the era of AI. What are the key leadership traits and characteristics in the AI era? What do you need to recognize from your personnel, your staff, in terms of AI literacy, all that too. So it's not just for, I would say, the rank and file, but also across the leadership of organizations too. So all the educational programs for leadership also needs to have AI focused on that too. So we are creating it, but I think it behooves all organizations to put an AI literacy plan. We've done that. We have an AI literacy for our own faculty, for our own staff, as well as for students. Our students actually are creating an AI club. This afternoon, actually, if you're here, there's an inaugural launch of that club. They're going to teach you how to download your private LLM and create your own private data with use of LLM. So these are the type of skill sets that I encourage everyone to embrace and be prepared, and think of it as a continuation that this is a rapidly advancing technology. Whatever we could possibly teach you today, in about a year or two, may become obsolete. You need a newer version of that. So it is really lifetime learning.
So as go ahead, please.
Just add. Gartner did a study a while ago where they basically said there are companies that are breakthrough and there are companies that are sort of laggards. And what they found was the breakthrough companies are the ones that really embrace AI, and not just the fact that they use it, but they look at a way to sort of how can you use this sort of increase your knowledge base, how can you sort of increase your innovation of it versus just cutting costs and sort of saving time. And so I think it really starts for these organizations to really have this sort of executive high-level buy-in, where they basically really embrace the use of AI and not ban the use of ChatGPT or things like that within the organization. I
Stick their heads in the sand.
That's the way that you have to learn by doing it and actually solving real problems.
Yeah, that's great. Accepting that it's here and learning how to work with it and innovate. Yeah, Suni,
It's so interesting, Larry, that you say banning ChatGPT. As I said, we are an AI native product, and we found that a certain part of the IT department was banning ChatGPT. And when we got to hear about the executive team, we were like, what is going on? Why? So it's often there's such a disconnect with what you might have the executives thinking versus leaders and managers versus employees. So being really purposeful about that and thinking about the change management for us in our executive roles is super important, because there's so much resistance to change, and thinking about the change curve like you do with any technology. is really important for us, and rewarding that, right? I had a conversation with my team about like 6 months ago, and I said, 8 months ago, and I said, what can we do using our product with the people experience in our organization? And of course, the recruitment use case is very easy, right? I mean, we can use it for transcription, for making sure that the time to fill is really quick, making good interview decisions, all of that stuff. But the rest of my HR organization was like, I don't think we can, because we need X, Y, Z things to happen. So it was so interesting that even the low-hanging fruit, and then in the end, an intern in the organization said, oh, why don't we use the Gong product to record a career conversation between a manager and an employee, and then have, it's not only transcription, but also, talk about career paths and, the next steps around career development from that conversation. And there were two things that happened there. The manager could focus on the conversation, which is what it's all about, rather than, writing down notes or taking down notes. And there was an actual, advantage to the organization because it created a skills repository for us. But that idea came from the intern, not from the leader of the learning department.
Yep.
Right? So it's also thinking about where do ideas actually come from.
Yes.
And it isn't all hierarchical.
I love that, accept and look for innovation everywhere, be open to this change. So as we're thinking about this change and openness to innovation, Eunice, AI technologies are obviously rapidly accelerating, as mentioned. So what are some of the emerging ones that are going to define our next decade, or our next 5 years? And if we can add on to that, for the rest of the panelists as well, what does that mean for all of us in this room? What does it mean for professionals, for students, and for leaders? But let's start with some of the technologies that you really see defining our next half decade and decade.
Yeah, I think there are a few things that have been mentioned already, but I'll just try to maybe summarize everything together. One, we talked about that base layer, the foundational layer. I think what we're seeing and what will continue to happen, it's going to be imperative, the commoditization of that. So AI infrastructure, it becoming cheaper. As a result, becoming more available. We talked about DeepSeek before, where one of the biggest innovation was not that it can just do it for cheaper, but also the fact that it can run on localized hardware. So you have it in your hands, and now we're talking about an LLM plugging locally to connect to any data set. So imagine what was available to AI experts 2 years ago, that will be in everybody's hand, 6 months, year down the road. It will be cheaper, it will be faster. And that we have seen that obviously on the compute side, generally speaking, that you can do the same process much faster, much more efficiently in a parallel way. So the accessibility of AI is going to continue to exponentially become more and more accessible. That's number one. I think the second piece, we've talked about a lot of automation and whatnot. I think we are getting to a point already where low-hanging fruits are becoming a little bit more difficult to obtain, needs to be more innovative. But I think, and Asiya touched on it a little bit, robotics and the intersection of physical and software world is one spot where I think we'll see a very humongous revolution. And what I mean by that is, think about scenarios like actually Sunny and I were involved in building some of the automation for autonomous shipping ports in the world. So when you think about that, like, cranes are moving and, ships are moving, they need a way to bring the physical world to the virtual world. I think there's a huge amount of potential in the next 5 years to see that transformation, because we have seen AI applied to just the basic kind of already a digital use case very often. But when robotics are involved, when a physical workflow is involved, when a car is involved and driving, we still haven't solved that use case. You think about it, like we still don't have fully autonomous production autopilots, but that should become a reality with AI as we go along. And lastly, I would say that one of the biggest trends I see is that the way we think about AI, like right now we're trying to acquire this as a kind of a unique add-on skill. But, I mean, I think we'll have to, in the next 5 years, people will be looking at better models to do basic things. So what I mean by that is like you have a statistics model and you can do something with that already. You will be thinking of better models, and AI just would be an underlying supporting technology. As Larry was mentioning, it's something you use all the time, not that, oh, I'm going to do AI and I'm going to out of the way. So I think the basic use cases will see a bigger evolution, and AI becomes a more supporting, supplying, augmentary technology. So everybody uses it, everybody applies it, but it creates a change in your overall model, how you're using it, how you're applying it. That's where I think we will see the biggest innovation.
Yeah. So before we move on to the Q&A, for the rest of the panelists, can you speak a little bit about what some of these new technologies, what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years really means for those of us in the room? How do we prepare? What are some things that we can do to future-proof? Yeah, please.
There are multiple trends of advancement happening in parallel right now that my view is that they're going to converge. Already would mention advancement in AI in itself, which is moving toward more generalized version of it, AGI, which is trying to really replicate our human cognitive ability. We're going to see a lot of advancement research in that area. But the physical side of, as was mentioned, in this advancement, happening in multiple fronts. The Internet of Things, the proliferation of sensors is going to evolve rapidly, and we're going to see a lot more sensors that possibly are AI-enabled at the edge that are going to be deployed. This could actually be used in multiple, especially for natural disaster predictions, and especially as we've gone through COVID, and we've gone through various natural disasters, like the fires we had in Los Angeles or other areas, that deployment of such sensors could really help manage and possibly mitigate some of those risks. Quantum computing. I mean, we're going to see in next really decade of very advanced computing that emerging. Right now, it's still hypothetical, it's still research-oriented, but it's becoming more promising, all that. And robotics. All these things, and nanotechnology, all these things are evolving simultaneously in parallel, but there's got to be a convergence because AI is horizontal. AI really be the intersection of all of them. Because once you add some of the intelligence of utilization of these advancements into a much broader use, that's where you're going to see that too. I don't have a crystal ball. It's not going to be, all those things have different pace of progress and advancement, but they are advancing rapidly. And we may see some of them sooner than later, but absolutely there's for people who really looking ahead in terms of their, positioning their career in terms of what is the best career pathway for me for the next 20, 30 years there. You can really, there's multiple horses you can bet on, and each one of them probably is going to come to a winning.
Excellent. Really good insights there. Larry, Suni, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, my point of view is I think, the next thing that's really going to sort of take everybody by storm is certainly agents, and like how can people automate workflows without humans necessarily in the loop and sort of get things done. I think the step beyond that is going to be around say, hey, what can you do with sort of AGI and being able to sort of put a bunch of these LLMs or put a bunch of these agents together to actually do a full function kind of thing. And so the time frame we'll sort of see, but I think it's certainly clear that in a nutshell it's going to be able to do more. And the question is like, how can you basically take advantage of that? And it's like, what are the use cases that are important to you that really can sort of drive a difference to you as an individual or as a company? And so I think it's sort of, you have basically a team of people that are ready to work for you. So how can you take advantage of that?
Yeah, excellent. And Suni, I know that this is near and dear to your heart, as I like to say.
I think everyone's answered the question. I have a question for everyone in the panelists.
Yeah.
What do you think would be if you were going to if you're going to coach your kids or guide your kids to take to choose something to go to study at university, what would you guide them to do now?
Ooh, excellent question.
You have a 5-year-old, Larry, so you're thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is, right, like when people start talking about what are the things that we still need humans to do?
Yep.
And I think it's usually around creativity, and I think it's really around sort of problem solving. And so I think, a lot of engineering disciplines are still really important for that. And so, I, for example, was a mechanical engineer
Yep.
as a student. Like, I've never worked professionally as
Yep.
a mechanical engineer, but,
Yep.
fundamentally, it's about systems thinking. It's about how do you sort of, bring these different things together. And so, like I said, I'm not endorsing people become MEs, but I think taking like sort of, that sort of engineering mindset,
Yeah.
I think is useful even if you aren't creating these things as, because the AI is. Yeah.
And I would add to it that you could choose any field, actually. But think about how AI would be transforming it, innovating it. And think of bringing those two ideas together. You could pursue
Exactly.
a career in medicine. Still, for as far as I think we can tell human history, there's always going to be need for physicians, clinicians, nurses, all that. There's no ever, ending to that. As much as we advance our technology, there's actually more need for that too. But then there's going to be a field that AI is going to be enhancing it. So what would be, again, the intersection of AI and the medical field as we pursue that? Legal fields. Hopefully we're going to continue to live in a civil society, rule of law, so there's need for legal services.
Yeah.
So it's still going to be asked to say, okay, I'm going to pursue, career in legal. How would AI change or transform, enhance that?
Yeah.
I want to pursue a technical career, engineering, as mentioned, all variety of engineers. Again, how would AI enhance and change that? Architectural fields. Actually, AI is already beginning to really impact those fields in terms of design and do that. So I don't think there's any field that, AI prevents from pursuing, but it's going to be AI enhanced, AI enabled, and integrated with that. That's where I think you should have, focus that. So AI is going to be really, just like happened with internet, so pervasive.
Yes.
And part and parcel of every activity we're going to be doing in the future. And whether it's transportation, whether it's retail, whether it's banking or finance, legal, or anything manufacturing. So, but that's where I think I would say that. So AI literacy becomes essential.
Yes.
Regardless of what career or what field of, profession anybody pursues.
Yeah.
What about you, Eunice?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of good things have been said. I would just say actually just one point that maybe hasn't been mentioned as much, and maybe it's also advice for students that when we are talking about AI, largely we're talking about benefits and, how it's going to be transformative. But one of the things I think we see in the industry is like, don't also be oblivious to it. So what I mean by that is that we saw and seen a lot of data and we see that in practice, customers, even teams, that people are using AI, but they don't know anything about it. And what I mean by that is you're using a tool, you're gonna have AI write code, you don't know anything about it. You're gonna use AI and you're gonna deploy to customer records, you don't know anything about it. So that's where I think I was mentioning about even the AI Club, spend the time to learn a little bit, like what is it giving you? Because yes, you can go find AI role, but if you make those mistakes in your career, you put in code that you don't understand and it creates 50 new problems, and you, instead of being the poster child of success, you will be the poster child of failure. And that's a real problem today with AI. So I think don't be oblivious to it, understand the implications. If you're using it, know what it can and cannot do, know its limitations, because whatever that field is, being oblivious to it, it's a real challenge today, right? I think we're seeing code written with AI more problems, models written with AI deployed in the wrong places, and that advantage that you build can suddenly become a disadvantage because you go to a workforce, do an internship or work problem, and you do that, and that's obviously not going to bode well. I think thinking about that aspect of it, I think is critical. That however, don't be afraid of it, but be literate to a point that you're not just blindly applying it, throwing it in a bunch of data, and you hope that something will come out, right? And we've seen that in the industry repeatedly, right? So I think there is a word of caution for the future.
Wise words. So keeping with that, don't lose your critical thinking, right? Don't put all of your eggs in that basket. So we're going to switch things up a little bit because we've got a bunch of you in the room. So I'm going to close out the webinar, but for those of you that want to stay for some Q&A, we've got the next half hour for that. So I'd really like to first thank you to our panelists, to all of you for sharing your insights, and thank you to all of you for joining us today, both online as well as in the room. We know that AI is transforming careers, leadership, and the entire hiring process. And our goal with this series and with today is to equip all of you with the knowledge, the tools, the strategies that you need to thrive in this AI-driven world. So before I wrap up, I do encourage you to explore GGU's learning and career development resources. Obviously, you can always contact Sia, as well as Trust Me AI's insights into AI adoption and workforce transformation. For those of you attending in person, we encourage you to stay for our continued Q&A and networking session. And finally, I'd like to extend another thank you to our GGU partners, Siazade, Julie Lee, and Robert Schaffner, just for their leadership, their support in getting this off the ground, as well as the GGU marketing and on-site teams and IT for helping all of this come together. Access to this recording is going to be available on YouTube, and you can connect with our panelists, explore additional resources, and we encourage you to share your feedback via a post-event survey, all available online and via email. So I'm Miria Taig, and it's been a pleasure to moderate today's discussion. Thank you, everyone, and we will now open up for Q&A. All right, anybody in the room, any questions that you have for our panelists? Yes, please. Mm.
Like better in the career because I think with AI right now the industry experts can use AI tools and create all the data science that we are supposed to be kind of doing as a data scientist and data scientist. Should we try to focus right now to specific industry and learn domain knowledge for a specific industry?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Answer that. I think that's an excellent question. Focusing on one single specific industry, it's a challenge because of the variety of students that we have. They come from different, walk of life, different background, and different career trajectories. So we actually do focus on AI in business across multiple verticals, multiple industries, just as a gateway for deeper understanding so someone can pursue that. If you remember, we created a course called MS BA 340, AI in Business, and we cover 15 different industries during the 15 sessions, from manufacturing, retail, marketing, sales, life sciences, pharmaceutical industry, healthcare, as well as broader other type of industries, and public domain use of it for societal's good, for that. Then you could choose based on that initial understanding to pursue deeper into your research and projects. So yes, definitely. Again, it's not so much of one single track. All that is having an understanding about the role and impact, the pros and cons. I was mentioned here, AI is not panacea for everything. So make sure you have understanding of its limitations, the challenges, the bias of the data that may go into some of those models that will reflect more bias. So that understanding sometimes at this early stage of business adoption innovation becomes as crucial as helping that business to transform and innovate too. So yes, we do that too, but then focusing only, let's say, if you make it healthcare, but if there's a specific fields that students want to pursue, there is room for that through projects, and that's where the AI Club is intended to be.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think one point I would add to that is that's from a learning perspective, obviously, I would totally agree with Saya that, there is probably more to learn. But I think companies are still evolving their career paths or roles for AI. So when you think about the work environment or applying for a job or whatever, we've seen people applying and saying, hey, you are doing this and I can do this for you. So obviously in that regard, you could take the knowledge that you take in that course, for example, and you say, hey, I'm gonna apply to pharmaceutical, and maybe give them an idea that, hey, look, using what I've learned for your industry, this is what I can do. I'm not saying they'll take your project, but it gives them perspectives that, as a lot of them are trying to figure out what those roles are. So I think having that kind of customization to work environment could be useful.
Yeah.
I think my general advice is, I think when you're early in your career, I wouldn't worry so much about specialization, because I think it really depends on what company you work for and sort of where you go there. I think the way to think about it, it's always a balance between breadth and depth. But the way I would look at it is, how can you essentially de-risk companies' investment in you? And so you have a lot of variables that you can basically sort of highlight. You could have domain knowledge, you could have like geographic knowledge, you could have language, you could have familiarity with sort of this industry or whatever. And so the idea is like, what are the 2 or 3 things that you could basically highlight as, hey, this is the foundation that I can build upon, and then what's the area where you can go and grow. And so I think it's the idea is like, who knows what the future will hold. So like I think some people, if you went all in on AR, VR, or blockchain, and now you feel like it's hard to say what is the one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Other questions from the room? Yes.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation of the CI and AI. So I was wondering, we've been discussing adoption of AI, and while we are doing that, we are kind of neglecting the possible problems that might arise, whether they're already and that might arise even in the future. I mean, the AI's impact on education or like development of tech. So while we are spearheading the development adoption of AI, what would your consideration be for tackling those problems that are already there or might arise in the future too? We've already been talking about the adoption, but we have to also
Yeah, great. And just because for those that are still online, the question is around, how do we mitigate and handle already existing risks or threats as we think about AI's ever increasing adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously this panel has been pretty optimistic in terms of the view of AI, but there are a lot of very real risks, and some of them can be from, hey, AGI is going to become sentient and kill us all, to AI is going to take away all our jobs, to even if AI isn't the one doing it, AI could be a catalyst for sort of, for a corporation or government to sort of do negative things. And so the question is, how do we sort of, manage this? And so I work with an organization called the Ethical AI Governance Group. And so our view is, what can we do to really accelerate responsible AI innovation? And so what are the kind of problems we're trying to solve? One is basically, right now, if you look at where the power, where the innovation, where all the oxygen is being sucked up, it's by basically 4 or 5 big American companies. And so the question is, it's very hard for a startup to succeed long-term because AI is very expensive. Like every dollar that a company raises, probably 60 to 70 cents of it goes back to these big tech companies to basically buy cloud compute credits or GPUs or things like that. And so the idea is, what can we do to sort of enable sort of that next generation of entrepreneurship, the next generation of startups to go and sort of succeed? And so essentially, that's all about, hey, how can we sort of have the guardrails from the big companies? How can you basically enable the small companies to go and build things? And how can we sort of motivate companies to go build these things responsibly? So there isn't going to be one sort of silver bullet. There needs to be a lot of things there. But you can sort of see the winds shift quite a bit. A couple years ago, the White House signed an executive order about safety. Last year, the AI Action Summit was about how do you do safety. This year, it's a different world. It's about innovation. And so it's not going to be a static environment. It's going to be continually shifting. And so this is why it's good to sort of really be abreast of what's going on and being able to sort of take advantage of what's out there.
And on that topic as well, we actually have a pre-existing webinar that we recorded, I believe it was the last session, on building trust and AI ethics and governance. And so that's available, it's up on YouTube, and that answers a lot of those questions in more depth and detail, because it is such an important element of our AI utilization. NC, I think you had a comment as well.
Yeah, I just want to say, anytime there's a new advancement, technology advancement, there's always a risk of its misuse or abuse. Even internet. When internet, was just coming around, everybody said, oh, that's going to be a great platform for dissemination, knowledge, and leveling the field of information for everyone. Unfortunately, we've seen it's used quite a bit for disinformation as well. And in fact, now my view is that it's probably more disinformation than information. So it could be abused, as AI has that potential to do that. And that's why I mentioned that our first 2 sessions was on the responsible ethical use of AI. So those guardrails needs to be there. But ultimately, it's a balance between a, ethical, responsible use without stifling innovation. So, and that's where really an educated group of, folks such as yourself who are studying here becomes very important. having that knowledge, that understanding of the role utility and the promise and perils of AI becomes important. Because you're right. Yes, there are also perils to maybe not, I do not espouse today apocalyptic view of AI that it's going to eradicate human race. I personally do not, subscribe to it. But there are risks associated with it too, and it's every conversation we've had, we talk about both sides of it. Today was more on the opportunities and the innovations and had not mentioned that, there are risks too, but that we already had that conversation on risk.
Yep. Excellent. Anybody else in the crowd? Yes.
Now that there are emerging tools that how can we ever secure our future? I mean, how can we ever, now we're doing a job and then there is a new tool. And now that there are newer tools, how can we ever secure a job? And how can you be so sure? We know AI is innovative and all of that. And how can we ever be sure that, okay, we have a job now and we can do well in it? But the deal is we're always, in a rush. We're always searching for a new tool and all of that.
Yeah.
How can we ever?
So for those of you still on the Zoom, the question is around, job security and how can you ensure a successful career with constant innovation and constant new tools and, something new every day.
I would highlight two things. Number one, I think it's just really important to have a growth mindset about this kind of thing. Just knowing that, hey, you're never going to be done learning. There's always going to be new things. And you need to sort of be able to sort of adapt to all of that. I think the other thing that I would emphasize is really, you sort of look at AI, right? Like, AI can do a lot of different things. But ultimately, people's relationship with AI is going to be really transactional. It's sort of like, what can you do? What can you not do? And it's like that. And so I think this is where, the human side of our behavior, communication, building relationships, sort of building that sort of long-term trust, that's not going to go away. Like if you look at a few years ago, I forget who it was, maybe Jeffrey Hinton, he basically said we don't need radiologists now because computers can detect things better than doctors. And he was accurate in that it's more accurate. But being a doctor is so much more than just being right all the time, right? Like you just imagine that. So it's like, how do you sort of build sort of these longer term relationships? I think that's really important.
And don't you think because of that, the institution of healthcare, why would people really need doctors if that's the case? If AI can really detect what's happening, we don't need.
I'll put it this way: like if you had a doctor who was brilliant, but he was an absolute jerk, didn't care about you, versus a doctor who maybe went to a slightly worse school or whatever. It's you don't make your decisions based on the accuracy of the doctor necessarily, right? Like there's a lot of factors out there, and so I think those are the kinds of things technically we have WebMD, all these stuff these days. Why do people still go to hospitals? Because there's something to know about the personalization, about the relationship aspect, and all of this stuff sort of plays a role. And it's not just healthcare. I think it's like this for everything.
Yep. And the human element remains important to humans. We don't just want to interact with a computer, with a screen, with our phones. And so I love also that mindset of just a constant growing and learning mindset, because it isn't going to stop, right? There is no point at which it's going to plateau.
And also I have a suggestion. Always look at your job as just beyond a collection of tasks.
Yes.
Yes, there are always, in every role, in every capacity, you have to do certain tasks. But a human being is more than just performing those tasks. Yes, simple tasks are going to get automated, that's what I meant that. But the human interaction, the human-centric part of it, it's not replaceable by AI, at least not in the near future. The human emotional intelligence portion of it is not. And as it was mentioned here very clearly, that you need all those soft skills to go with these enhanced, more harder skills that it's emerging.
Yeah.
And those things are just adaptation. So always, and if you go for an interview, all that, make sure you get a good perspective of the role of that job. It's just beyond simple tasks, all that too, Yes, if there was a job, let's say many years ago, somebody sitting at a kiosk collecting money on a toll, gate at a bridge, all that kind of job, which was very reduced to that simple mechanical act of collecting, funds. Yes, that has been replaced by these electronic tags. But most jobs should be way more than just simple tasks. That's why conversation with your employers that how you could actually bring AI to improve some of those tasks, but you as someone who actually are in charge of that utility, not someone who are at the mercy of AI. I think it's a more of an attitude, more perspective, and employers, and if they have a right leadership, should have that mindset as well.
Yeah. Excellent insights. Other questions from the room? All right, guys. Well, we'll be around for a little while after. So if you do want to come up, have one-on-one conversations, introduce yourselves, or if you have a light bulb moment and you go, oh, I forgot to ask, we'll be here for a little bit. So thank you to everybody in the room for your wonderful questions, and to those of you online, and enjoy the rest of Campus Week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.